which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Laura, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 14th issue of the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. What spooks Gen Z? Backrooms, a horror movie about an uncanny labyrinth space, plays on a generation's fears about where digital life and the real world collide. By Joseph Bernstein. Every generation gets the horror film it deserves. In the 1950s, invasions of the body snatchers pulsed with post-war fears about communist infiltration. Vietnam-era distrust of American institutions haunts 1970s classics like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Exorcist. The slasher films of the 1980s, made popular by suburban latchkey Gen Xers, typically feature absent parents, or monstrous ones. And mid-aughts torture porn, like the Saw series, can be read in the context of Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib scandal. Backrooms, a new film about a frustrated architect turned furniture salesman who discovers an eerie dimension of mostly empty rooms, provides a glimpse of a Gen Z nightmare, being stuck inside an endless and mutating alternate reality. A frightening version of a slopified, gamified, distorted universe with no boundaries between the personal and the professional. Backrooms tracks a generation's deep unease with life lived online. Some spoilers ahead. The movie is a Gen Z sensation. It grossed $81 million domestically in its opening weekend. About 86% of the audience was under 35, according to PostTrack, a film industry research service. 44% was under 21. So why are Zoomers so drawn to it? It's partly a matter of representation. At 20, the film's director, Kane Parsons, is a child of the internet, with a style forged by digital media and video games. Brendan Reynolds, a 26-year-old who works for the New York Public Library, said that he recognized a film made by someone with a common generational experience. It's the first movie I've seen directed by someone who grew up with vaporwave, said Reynolds, referring to an online music microgenre from the early 2010s. In 2022, using common graphics software, Parsons, who was anonymous at the time, turned an unsettling meme image of an early aughts office into a short video. The Backrooms, found footage, was such a hit. As of this week, it's been viewed more than 80 million times, that A24, the stylish production house that has defined a certain kind of glossy indie filmmaking in the 2020s, hired him to direct a feature-length version. Much of the discussion about Backrooms has focused on its exciting novelty as a path forward for Hollywood to get young audiences in seats, as a new pipeline for stories that bubble up from internet subcultures, and for its disquieting sensibility, which is something like the big screen debut for the Gen Z preoccupation with uncanny physical spaces. It's a generation that grew up scaring itself with digital images of circa Y2K landscapes, abandoned shopping malls, for instance. But it's not the first movie based on a meme. It's not even the first movie based on a creepy meme, though the less said about Slenderman, the 2018 film about the digital urban legend, the better. And the myth of the labyrinth is one of the most enduring in Western civilization, from Knossos to Florence, all the way through to Borges and the hedge maze of Kubrick's The Shining. So-called liminal spaces, surreally depopulated man-made expanses, have been a feature of horror and science fiction throughout their history. Yet the labyrinth in Parsons' movie seems to be calling to a new generation for new reasons. Horror films always take the shape of the world in which they are made, and they channel the particular anxieties and traumas of that era and that context, said Adam Lowenstein, director of the Horror Studies Center at the University of Pittsburgh. In Parsons' film, Clark stumbles through a portal to the back rooms underneath his furniture store. The weird, looping combinations of office space he finds there suggest a kind of demented learning algorithm. Some Gen Zers read the film as a commentary on AI and the profusion of uncanny online slop. I think people are feeling very lost these days, said Sydney Andrews, a 23-year-old production designer in New York who saw and loved Backrooms. Our generation is really freaked out about AI. Parsons has called AI genuinely harmful, adding that if he could, he would make generative AI disappear forever. But he says the most important inspiration for his work is a video game, Portal 2, and that some of his first digital creations were in Minecraft. In Backrooms, a person enters the liminal zone by clipping, gamerspeak for passing through a solid wall. From there, the maddening repetition in Backrooms resembles procedural generation, a technique that allows video game designers to feed digital elements, walls, floors, monsters, into an algorithm, and then generates a much larger world. It's a way of building scale, cheaply, sometimes criticized for its mindlessly repetitive quality. It's easy to imagine why the idea of being stuck inside a proliferating maze would haunt a Gen Z audience. After all, these young people spent formative years trapped indoors during the pandemic, largely experiencing the outside world through thick layers of digital mediation. Some developed a growing sense that the algorithms that seemed to provide infinite choices were in fact leading them down narrow paths. You could be watching any of a billion videos, but the actually available choices are determined by something you can't name or point at, said Aidan Walker, a 27-year-old internet culture researcher and writer. It feels tyrannical, even if in the moment you have freedom. Even before the pandemic, younger generations had a tendency to apply a gamified digital filter to the real world. Pokemon Go, the mobile game that peaked in popularity in 2016, encouraged children to view the real world as an endless playground animated by their phone. Today, TikTokers try speed runs through Scientology buildings, essentially attempting to turn labyrinth off-limit spaces into video game levels. Gen Z influencers ride jet skis to Little St. James, better known as Epstein Island, to make content about the temple, a supposedly haunted structure there. NPC, a video game term for non-player character, has been prodded into the popular lexicon by Gen Zers. Altogether, it's a vision of life as an epic game created by a hidden hand full of Easter eggs, played with a smart device. In the hands of many Zoomers, smartphones have become tools to re-enchant the world, to imbue the built environment with the magical properties of a scary story. Of course, for much of Gen Z, the real world is a scary story, one with a hostile job market administered by a distant gerontocracy with doom on the horizon. You turn your head up from your phone, but you can't get a job, get a house, said Walker, the internet culture researcher. There is this sense of constricting opportunity. IRL is a labyrinth you're lost in. And while digital life may provide forms of distraction, digital work, online content creation being the most obvious example, is a Darwinian battleground that demands total dedication and sometimes the only job prospect Gen Z can imagine. It's a generation where work itself is a very disconcerting and disturbing and frightening prospect, Lowenstein, the University of Pittsburgh professor, said. In Backrooms, work and home are hopelessly intertwined. Clark, the film's protagonist, played by the Gen X actor Chitwell Ejiofor, sleeps in a bed on the showroom floor. The back rooms themselves resemble offices, but they are full of home decor, patio furniture, and dirty laundry. And the film's vision of young people at work is nightmarish. While Clark at least has professional dreams, however unfulfilled, his two young employees, who are depicted as incompetent and stoned, seem to have no dreams at all. Clark offers the pair gig work, first as content producers and then as assistants in his quest to explore the back rooms. Without going into detail, the two should have asked for hazard pay. They're simply the only bodies on hand. Adding a layer of meta-commentary, Parsons' astonishing success story has been braided into the marketing of the film itself. James Francis, a professor of English at Texas A&M University, who specializes in horror movies, pointed out that Parsons has been a bigger part of the publicity push around the movie than either of the film's Oscar-nominated stars. One way of seeing Parsons' ascension from anonymous content creator to star Hollywood director is an escape from the labyrinth of digital work in the real world. Consider, when the back rooms of Parsons' viral short were entirely computer-generated for the movie, A24 sprang for a real 3,000 square foot set. Those thresholds and back rooms are about that culture center, about wishing I could go through a doorway and change my life, Francis said. There is a fear and anxiety at the idea of living an algorithmic life instead of an individual one. Backrooms ends on an ambiguous note, with one main character's fate unresolved. It's unclear whether the person is still inside the maze or back out in the real world. More frighteningly, it's unclear whether that even matters. Graham Plattner tucks in his shirt. On election night, the Democratic candidate from Maine wore a button-up, a deviation from the candidate's unvarnished image. By Jacob Gallagher. When Graham Plattner delivered his victory speech on Tuesday night after winning the Democratic primary in Maine, there was something different about his appearance. Atypically for Plattner, whose unvarnished image has been central to his Senate run, he wore a button-up dress shirt, tucked in. Was this a new Plattner? Not necessarily. He was back in a hoodie on Morning Joe the next day. Still, it was a departure for the nominee, who from the beginning has presented in a Take Me For Who I Am wardrobe. Plattner, whose campaign has been aided by advisors, including Morris Katz, who also worked with Mayor Zohran Mamdani in Senator John Fetterman, was nudged into running in part because of his untamed rhetoric and rough-hued look. As my colleague Joe Bernstein wrote in January, Plattner fit the mold of a gruff white guy who looked as if he had just walked off a job site, one of the things Democratic operatives like Katz have sought out as they attempt to draw working-class voters back to the party. But like most politicians, he can show a versatility when needed. Plattner seemed to acknowledge the unease swirling around his candidacy when he met with Democratic senators in Washington earlier this month. Plattner arrived on the Hill in a lightly checked blazer and a dress shirt, a more conventional outfit than seemed to reflect the gravity of what he was facing. It was perhaps also a recognition of a formality that endures in the Senate offices in Washington. On Tuesday night, Plattner again looked, for really only the second time, more like a traditional politician, albeit one in the still softly rumpled manner of his ideological peer, Bernie Sanders. The left is betting that working-class voters want to see versions of themselves running. The right seems less preoccupied with this notion. After all, a significant swath of Republican voters who could be classified as working class voted for a wealthy New York real estate magnate in a suit. And of course, this proletarian packaging appears to play differently for different candidates. Though Plattner and Mayor Mamdani both talk about upending inequality and promoting social programs, Mamdani has maintained his uniform of suits on the trail and in office, which in New York made the young, previously little-known candidate appear more serious. In rural-leaning Maine, Plattner, who for several years has been an oyster farmer, campaigned in pocketed work shirts and tees with Union insignia. He wore unremarkable jeans and trucker hats from Bourgeois Guitars in Lewiston and the Maine Outdoor School. When the New York Times photographed him at a town hall in April, his hair was flipped up, as if he had just taken that hat off seconds before. Plattner ingratiated himself to voters as a bearded guy in a Paul Bunyan flannel shirt who said things like, "In the state of Maine, almost everybody's working class. Everybody works, everybody struggles." For some Maine voters, Plattner's image made him a compelling missionary for such a class-focused message. He didn't look like a consultant parachuting in to tell them what their struggles were. In his sun-faded hat and boots, he looked like he might be familiar with such struggles himself. The clothes did not overshadow his populist messages, but they aided in making them go down believably. He's not the first candidate to put forth a homespun image. Erstwhile peanut farmer Jimmy Carter wore jeans all the way to the White House. When Beto O'Rourke appeared on the cover of Vanity Fair in an article about his presidential ambitions, he did so standing next to a pickup truck in jeans. More recently, John Fetterman won his Senate seat in charat hoodies and shorts, a look that he brought with him to Washington. For Plattner, his pre-political wardrobe worked to articulate, in shorthand, that he was a working-class Maine veteran who had answered a political calling. His advisors bet his appearance would translate to voters as that slipperiest thing in politics, authenticity, especially regional authenticity. As new reports surface about Plattner's past, including what former girlfriends have described as unsettling behavior, and questions of whether Plattner was aware a tattoo had Nazi connotations, his skeptics and opponents continue to wrestle with whether Plattner's image is authentic or artificial. Nonetheless, his supporters in Maine delivered him the Democratic nomination. It was striking watching coverage of this campaign and how many of the people in Plattner's audiences were dressed just as he had on the trail. Plattner, though, on Tuesday night, looked a little more Beltway than he had before. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Madeline Cash isn't playing around, or is she? Her debut novel taps into a microgeneration's blurring of performance and reality. By Mikkel Rosengard. Madeline Cash has had many infestations in her life. On a recent day in London, she let in a bearded exterminator to spray her apartment for moths. Like her debut novel, Lost Lambs, her flat had been taken over by pesky flying bugs. "The first step is admitting you have a problem," Cash said, flashing the perforated hemline of her skirt. In her off-kilter book from this winter about a lovable oddball family, it is not only the local church that is infested by gnats. The bugs travel onto the page, infesting the spelling of words. Exterminate, gnaturally, digestination. It's one of many gags in her jester grimoire. "I wanted to do the opposite of diaristic autofiction," she said. "I wanted to do something maximalist." Cash, a 30-year-old writer who grew up in California, had come to London to be with her boyfriend, a filmmaker who was studying at Central Saint Martin. The move had taken her out of New York, where she was part of the literary circle that had started gathering in and around Chinatown during the pandemic around publications like The Drunken Canal, Heavy Traffic, and Forever, which Cash has founded with two best friends. A crop of fiction has sprouted from this downtown milieu over the last 2 years, including My First Book by Honor Levi, Flat Earth by Anika Jade Levi, and Paradise Logic by Sophie Kemp. What sets this cohort apart is a generational effect that values artifice over nature, theatricality over authenticity, candy vapes over natural wine. We were told that we could never buy property and that the climate was going to destroy us, Cash said. What else can we do but make art about it? So we got drunk and put on costumes and threw parties and published ridiculous stories and didn't think about censorship. The essayist and critic Sam Criss sees some promise in the movement. I don't know if I could point to any contemporary literary movements that are coming up with anything vastly better, he said. I'd love it if they all found something to write about other than themselves, though. That would be very encouraging. A frequent criticism of the scene is summed up by a comment beneath a recent essay about the larger Dimes Square milieu. Perhaps unique among scenes in that it produced no meaningful art. Lost Lambs would seem to suggest otherwise. Called the first internet novel with broad appeal, it has been sold to 21 countries since it came out in January. The art house studio, A24, has acquired the book for a limited series. To me, Chinatown is like the Algonquin Round Table, Cash said. This is where the best minds of my generation are, and people love to hate from the outside of the club. She led the exterminator to the study. On the desk, the 12-step prayer book was stacked on top of a copy of Infinite Jest, adorned with Hello Kitty stickers. The pest controller scribbled an insecticide note as he prepared to spray the flat. Should be all right to head back in about 2 days. Cash took a frantic look around the room. Everything will work out as it should, she said. God never sends mail to the wrong address. Temporarily outcast of her apartment, Cash's first stop in her moth exile was the local pub. Eyeing a sign reading "No children after 7 p.m., she suggested we take our drinks outside. I may want to chain smoke, which I shouldn't do tonight in the hotel, she said. Cash, who grew up in the Sherman Oaks section of Los Angeles, sipped from a pint of Coke. She was wearing white socks, black ballet flats, and a black woolen cardigan. A gold crucifix hung around her neck. It belonged to her grandmother, a Croatian immigrant on her father's side. She was the only one in the family who was nice to me, she said. For Lost Lambs, Cash drew from her upbringing. Her mother is an actress who became a hospice nurse when her Hollywood jobs dried up. Her estranged father, she said, is a very conservative Navy guy who lives in San Pedro, a Los Angeles neighborhood not unlike the unnamed port town where her book is set. I have the classic "dad took off on me" story, she said, lighting a cigarette. He had a kind of replacement family on an insane property I would sometimes visit on the weekends. He had a pet peacock in a sunroom. Cash's characters go to comedic extremes to find connection outside the shaky family unit. One daughter joins a terrorist cell. A second dates a war veteran who goes by War Crimes Wes. A third tumbles down a conspiracy rabbit hole. Religion emerges as a big theme. There's a cinephile priest, a promiscuous church lady, and a dubious support group at the local parish. When all this new Catholicism came around, that was very fascinating to me, Cash said, referring to a mini wave of conversion among the downtown set in New York. All these kids who had grown up with parents that rejected orthodoxy were now returning to it, like needing something. And it wasn't necessarily the teachings of the Catholic Church, but just community. She shared some of that yearning. In Los Angeles, during the pandemic, Cash was struggling to get her career started. She had interned for The Onion and Conan, but was considering giving up on comedy. In search of something more stimulating, Cash set out to organize a reading at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, where she had worked as a teenager. The reading brought her back in touch with her high school best friend, the writer Anika Jade Levy, who helped organize the event. They read each other's work and traded takes on the writing that had emerged in the 2010s. In their view, none of it seemed to capture the chaos and dysfunction that had come to define the COVID era. They also kept an eye on the literary scene and sensibility that was emerging on the opposite coast. I think I idealized downtown because a lot of the tyrant book writers that I admired orbited around Chinatown, she said, referring to the independent publisher in New York. She rattled off some names: Atticus Lish, Jordan Castro, Honor Levi. I thought they were doing something transgressive and new and interesting, and I literally just moved there with a suitcase. For Cash, an absurdist world needs absurdist remedies. I think it's easier to hold a mirror up to society if it's a funhouse mirror, if it's distorted and a little bit hyperbolic, she said. In 2022, Cash and Levi, along with the art director Natalia Ruse, founded Forever, a magazine that embraced the low-quality aesthetic of the early digital age, publishing deliberately glib, rough-edged fiction out of touch with mainstream literature. Cash said they were trying to meet a cultural need for something more playful in literary culture. Levi described their publication as a place for writing that isn't stuffy and professionalized and institutional. At literary parties, the two could be spotted roaming the room in twin princess dresses, their pastel ruffles standing out among the scrum of pullovers and Oxford shirts. We would say the most ridiculous things, Cash said. I told one reporter that I was an orphan. Everything was just to play to us. On the day after the exterminator's visit, I met Cash at the Zetter Hotel, where she was waiting out the moth exterminators with her boyfriend, Chris Comfort, a filmmaker. She was dressed in a white dressing gown, eating a cheeseburger on the canopy bed with a friend, Marina Schultz. Cash reflected on the 2 years she spent working on Lost Lambs. She spoke of visits to the emergency room and cocaine on mirrored trays and nights blacked out on park benches. The theatrics got to a point where Comfort decided to end their relationship. I was just slowly and systematically losing everything. I could see it slipping away into this calamity that is all my own making, she said. In New York, Cash decided to stop editing Forever and take a break from the scene. She sensed it was her only chance to win back her boyfriend. She said she volunteered at a women's shelter and brought 12-step meetings to the prison in Chinatown. She got sober, got back together with Comfort, and set to work on a second novel about an autistic man who is constructing a giant carousel. In the London hotel room, Cash sat down by the wardrobe mirror to adjust her makeup. I'm reading Fear of Flying, she said, referring to the Erica Jong novel. And she says, when you try to seduce the public, you end up feeling like a whore. And it does kind of feel like that. Her year of London sobriety has been boring but necessary, she said. In a few weeks, she would be back in New York, back in Chinatown, back in her scene. You can't save your ass and your face at the same time, she said, smearing blush across her cheek. So it hasn't been very glamorous. At some point, the fantasy gives way to reality. They tracked fitness, food, and sleep obsessively. Now they're tuning out. As some online lean into biohacking and wellness metrics, reformed optimizers are canceling Pilates and having that extra glass of wine. By Jessica Roy. For 3 years, Ashwin Krishnaswamy had a rigid schedule. He logged his morning wake time, exercise, and how many alcoholic and caffeinated beverages he had each day. Tracking these metrics initially helped Krishnaswamy, a 34-year-old content creator, develop better habits. But eventually, he noticed himself getting too obsessed with the numbers, skipping hangouts with friends to keep an early bedtime streak, for example. Krishnaswamy realized, he said in an interview, I'm kind of just optimizing stuff for optimization's sake. He started to wonder what it was all for. We need a 90 sleep score, 10,000 steps a day, a bed cooled to 68 degrees, 6 miles on Strava, all for us to be better at, what, sending emails or talking on a podcast? He said in a TikTok video, which has been viewed over 1.8 million times. Optimization culture, he said, has gone too far and is spiritually killing us. There are now more ways to monitor your health than ever, with wearable trackers including smartwatches, rings, and even clothing. While some people have committed to biohacking and hyper-optimization, others, like Krishnaswamy, are saying enough. The debate gained momentum when a clip surfaced of Stephen Bartlett, host of the Diary of a CEO podcast, saying that a couple of glasses of wine ruined days of his life. He cited the domino effect of worse sleep, eating habits, and exercise, which he measured on his Whoop device. If there is indeed a war on pleasure, the reformed optimizers are laying down the arms taken up by their sober, health and image-obsessed former selves, and picking up an extra glass of wine and a Pilates class cancellation fee instead. Neil Fullerton, an educator in Austin, Texas, got a Fitbit in 2015 to improve habits. But it kind of snowballed, he said. Like Krishnaswamy, he checked his sleep quality obsessively, recorded his food, drink, and sun exposure, and closely tracked his heart rate and oxygen levels at the gym. He had an Apple Watch and a Whoop device, which he wore simultaneously, and a Fitbit for workouts. Then one day last year, he was about to meditate, something he tracked, when it dawned on him. All of this tracking was making him more stressed. I was like, oh, this is sort of like the opposite point of meditation, he said. I'm sure there are lots of people who are measuring these things and using them to improve their quality of life, Fullerton said, but I wasn't doing anything with all this information. Habit tracking does have its benefits. Research has found that those who track their behavior are more likely to reach their goals, and that streaks provide mini dopamine hits that help make the habit worth pursuing. For some, optimization can tip over into something unhealthy. Edie Hortzman, a 36-year-old nutrition consultant and health coach who lives in Denver, started tracking steps and protein intake when she was diagnosed with polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome, formerly called PCOS. She used a Fitbit to count her steps, knowing that walking could help her maintain healthy blood sugar level. My personality is I go all in. I don't just kind of like dip my toes in the water, Hortzman said. So I'd be like, oh, I got 6,000 steps today. I wonder if I can get to 6,500 tomorrow. And eventually that number just kept climbing and climbing. She eventually paced around her apartment to hit 10,000 a day. I became completely addicted, she added. I was basically checking my step count before I was truly checking in with myself. And in my opinion, that's not wellness. It's anxiety with a fitness label. The gamification of health metrics is more complicated for those experiencing anxiety or related disorders, which the CDC said in 2024 was about 1 in 5 people. Adam C. Frank, a professor of clinical psychiatry at the University of Southern California, has studied how wearable devices affect those with obsessive-compulsive disorder. For people with OCD, it can kind of trigger obsessions and then compulsions, he said. There is also a part of the general population for whom fitness tracking at first feels helpful. It feels informative, he said, and then it becomes like an end in itself, instead of supporting better physical or mental health. Hortzman eventually put her device away in a drawer at her husband's suggestion. All of a sudden, I was able to actually tap into my own body's feedback in terms of my energy and mood. Since ditching their wearables, Fullerton, Hortzman, and Krishnaswamy say they've all managed to maintain healthy habits around exercise, sleep, and eating. I feel like my mental health has improved because I'm no longer sort of obsessing over all this data, Fullerton said. I'm not an anti-tracker, he added, but I am an anti-tracker for me. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Style section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The guy who knows what Marcus Rashford and Travis Kelce want to wear. How Amiri Built a Brand on the Culture of Sports by Vanessa Friedman. Last year, Mike Amiri, the designer whose opulently ripped men's skinny jeans launched 1,000 Instagram posts and his business, encountered the soccer effect for the first time. Barcelona Football Club, the Spanish soccer team that has won the Champions League 5 times and is contributing 16 players to various World Cup teams, announced that Amiri would be its official formal wear partner for the next 5 years. The result, Amiri said, left the Bieber effect in the shade. It trumped the Maluma effect and the Teyana Taylor effect, the effect of pretty much any of the celebrities who wear his label. That post got like 250 million impressions, Amiri said. We were a niche Los Angeles brand, doing shows in Paris, and then all of a sudden we became global. When the team started deplaning in its suits, people began showing up in his stores with screenshots and pages ripped from newspapers, asking for the same styles. Internationally, soccer is just another level, he said. It's like a different language. It is one that everyone will soon encounter thanks to the World Cup, which started this week. And as fashion wises up to the ways the sport can take them, well, everywhere, Lowe is dressing the Spanish team, Louis Vuitton is making the trophy cases, and Nike is collaborating with Jacquemus on the French team's jerseys, Amiri may be a case study in what happens next. He saw the importance of the tunnel and making clothes that fit athletes before anybody else, said Carla Welch, a stylist who works with Kelsey Plum of the Los Angeles Sparks and the tennis star Ariana Sabalenka. That was back in 2014, when Amiri was an ex-music producer, songwriter, and law school graduate, hanging around the garment district of Los Angeles and DIYing clothes in an office underneath a Thai restaurant. I would look at guys at basketball games, and the guys on the front row would always have $1,000 shoes, Louis Vuittons or red-bottom sneakers, Amiri said. He was standing in his VIP fitting area. Honestly, it's more like a house, on South Rodeo Drive, a cream and wood-tone space that resembles nothing so much as a 5-star hotel. They'd have snake-billed hats by Dawn C., which are like $1,100, he said. They'd have some crazy jacket and some crazy watch, but no one was doing luxury denim that symbolized the same sort of status or curation. So he did. Maxfield picked him up within 2 weeks. Mick Jagger had bought a piece. Odell Beckham Jr., the Giants' wide receiver, followed. And in 2016, Beckham suggested that Amiri be his date for the ESPY Awards show and walk the red carpet like they do at the Met Gala, Amiri said. A decade later, he's doing more than $300 million a year in revenue, has 31 stores, with 6 more opening this year, 100,000 square foot campus of assorted old steel warehouses in downtown Los Angeles, 400 employees, and 1 minority investor, Renzo Rosso, the founder of OTB Group, which owns Diesel and Maison Margiela. Even though Amiri, 49, has no formal fashion education and has what he categorized as among the most CFDA losses ever, he has been nominated 6 times for American Fashion Awards and never won. He has learned to heed what his friend Virgil Abloh told him when he was depressed about his losing streak. Our work is measured in the streets and people's closets. One of my first fashion reviews in Paris was kind of negative, Amiri said. It criticized him for treating the Paris runway like an NBA tunnel walk. I was like, but NBA tunnels are awesome, he said. Getting a stamp of approval from the old guard is cute, but the culture has to give you a stamp of approval. For him, increasingly, sports is the culture. The athlete thing happened, Amiri said, somewhat by accident, because his early skinny jeans came with a bit of stretch and had long inseams, so they would bunch around the calves. They tended to fit people with atypical bodies. Amiri was one of the first brands I gravitated towards because the clothes worked with my body rather than against it, said Kyle Kuzma of the Milwaukee Bucks. Amiri's aesthetic, which is sort of old Sunset Strip meets casino, also worked for Kuzma. His favorite look? A sparkling fringed set he wore for a season opener's tunnel walk. Paul Pogba, the Monaco midfielder, was another early adopter. My first piece of Amiri was a pair of jeans, all black, ripped with python, he said. They were fire. Very, very soft. Now, if I want to go out to an event or red carpet, I wear Amiri. Athletes like a little flash, Welch, the stylist, said. The Amiri clothes, she said, are very rock star and very LA. In the best way possible. Like an iteration on Dickie pants, but in beautiful suiting fabric. Athletes also appreciated the idea that a designer might be interested in them in the first place. Even a decade ago, fashion largely ignored sports stars in favor of traditional red carpet celebrities. They would be happy to get an invite to the runway shows and get dressed, Amiri said. Then they became friends, because I was their inside guy. Who Amiri is, as a guy, comes up a lot when people talk about him. I always think how he looks is exactly how I want a guy to look, Welch said. His looks usually involve a black sweater, pleated straight-leg black trousers, and black snakeskin boots. With his neatly cropped beard, baby face, and slicked back hair, Amiri resembles a nightcrawler who puts green juice in his monogrammed silver flask instead of Casa Dragones. Amiri does play basketball and has 3 teenagers with Shirin, his wife of 18 years. The backyard of his house in Beverly Hills includes a basketball court, swimming pool, soccer goal, and ping pong table. After Marty Supreme, Sharon said, there were a lot of family table tennis tournaments that ended in tears because Amiri wouldn't let the kids win. Amiri and Rosso sometimes vacation together. Last New Year, the families went to the Maldives on Rosso's boat. He considers me like his fashion grandfather, Rosso said, as opposed to, say, godfather. When Neymar, the Brazilian soccer star, is around, the 2 men trade jerseys. Marcus Rashford, the Manchester United forward, who was on loan to Barcelona last season, called Amiri's son on his last birthday and left a voicemail message. His son thought it was a joke. He met Travis Kelce in Vegas at a club, and they bonded while hanging out behind a DJ booth. Since then, Kelce has worn Amiri numerous times, including for his 2024 and 2025 Super Bowl tunnel walks. He may be wearing Amiri this week to accompany Taylor Swift to her Songwriters Hall of Fame induction ceremony, a pinstriped Tony Montana as Dean Martin-style suit. He'll pick the most 70s fitting suit, Amiri said of Kelce's taste. He's not scared. My kids will come down and say, Dad, he's getting roasted on social. And Travis is like, it's good, it's everywhere. See his 2025 Super Bowl outfit, a burgundy number that was widely mocked for its 1970s pimp vibe. For his part, Kelce says he likes the sophistication and individuality of Amiri's clothes, and that the designer seems to have so much fun with it. The relationship with athletes has become like a superpower for us, Amiri said. These guys are wearing Amiri to the game, outside the game, in the club. It's being lived in a really organic way. When Barcelona first approached him, Amiri said he was surprised because generally these sponsorships involve a brand not only making clothes for free or in exchange for free publicity, but also paying for the chance to work with them. Amiri, while successful, was not in a position to do that. That's a level of sponsorship usually limited to a different size company, he said. But the team owners had seen the players themselves wearing the label. Instead of signing a contract with a massive luxury brand that's going to pay a crazy amount of money, they thought, we just want to dress them in what they want to wear, Amiri said. Amiri's Barcelona contract is for both the men's and women's teams, and he has a new division in the company devoted to the team. For winter 2025, the first season, the clothes took the form of double-breasted navy pinstripe suiting, red and blue rep ties, with a cursive Amiri scrawled between the stripes, and a mid-length wool overcoat that Manel de Rio, Barca's managing editor, said was his favorite piece. For fall, the team is getting brown leather bombers, gray pinstripe suits, ribbed knit dark gray polo shirts, and claret ties. The idea was to be a little Peaky Blinders-ish in a swaggier way, Amiri said, not so conservative. It has been a learning experience. If you're trying to do trousers that exaggerates the leg, you usually have to go high waist and then straight down from the knee, he said. But the players' thighs are so big that if you go straight down, you'll end up with a giant box. We have to fit each one. So if they're in Japan doing an exhibition, we have to send people to Japan to measure their thighs. The effort is worth it because the partnership has effectively recast the label as a place for tailoring, not just denim. After the team's first appearance in its travel finery, Amiri realized, he said, we're going to sell a lot of suits. Now only 20% of Amiri's business is jeans. Amiri is testing the market with women's wear and children's wear, and fragrance is next. And he's not stopping at soccer. He has worked with Formula One drivers like Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, as well as the WNBA star Caitlin Clark and the sprinter Noah Lyles. He also has designs on tennis. Last January, Shedeur Sanders of the Cleveland Browns and his brother Shiloh sat in the front row at the Amiri show, sparking rumors that Shedeur had signed an $80 million contract with the label. Shocking, cried Field Talk. We're talking high fashion European runway. Amiri denied there was any formal arrangement and said it had just been a case of friends showing up for friends. Kuzma is going to his next Paris show. We're in a world where every photo is polished, every video is not real, everything is perfect, Amiri said. The only place you can really experience humanity is a concert or with athletes on the field. Even beyond the World Cup, he said, sports is going to drive culture more than ever. And he's convinced that that's going to drive what everyone wears. Modern love. How to eat pizza with a male model. Order slices, fold them in half, flirt with a male model, hope it makes your boyfriend jealous. By Haley Krishner. I have someone I want you to meet, my mother said. He's a male model. His name is Jason. I was 20, home on a college break, and the home was new. About a month after I had graduated from high school, my mother had left New Jersey for an apartment in Manhattan. This male model was my age, my mother explained. He was sweet, kind of lonely. I think he misses home, she said. I made him spaghetti. You made a male model spaghetti? Her friend worked at a men's modeling agency, and Jason was one of her clients. I had a boyfriend who lived in New Jersey. My best friend Liz slept over that night in anticipation of the male model. She still lived in New Jersey, and I would have to drive her back the next day. She and I slapped each other's arms and ran to the mirror, picking at zits. My mother shouted from the tiny kitchen of our new apartment, "He's got a Calvin Klein shoot coming up. I'm warning you. He's gorgeous." I wondered if my boyfriend might be jealous. Not because he was the jealous type. Maybe with someone else he would have been. But our relationship was long distance and open. There wasn't time for ownership or rules. I went to college in Boston, and he went to a local college in New Jersey. We talked almost every night, and I shared stories of my hookups and one-night stands with him over the phone. I told him how I made out with a guy at a bar and explained to the guy, the only reason I'm making out with you is because you look like my boyfriend who lives in New Jersey. But it wasn't a fair exchange because my boyfriend never gave me any details about his activities. I asked him if there were other girls, other kisses, just to pass the time. Never, he said. Except there were. Friends told me about him in this bar or that bar, lip-locked with this girl or that girl. I kept waiting for him to tell me. There was nothing to hide. It was distance that kept us apart, not other women, right? For his birthday, I gave him a purple lava lamp. We had been together for 2 years, on and off, and had never said, I love you. That night, I couldn't hold in the words and practically collapsed to my knees when I told him I loved him. Remember the first time you said, I love you to someone? The air rushes out of you like you've taken an anvil in the stomach. But he said nothing. I told him I loved him, and he gave me a hug and said, thank you. We lay in his bed side by side as the purple blobs in the lava lamp cast a glow across the walls of his small bedroom. Now, waiting in my mother's apartment, the door buzzed. The male model is here, I squealed. He has a name, my mother said. Jason was easily the most beautiful person I had ever seen in my life. Short-cut blonde hair, cheekbones, straw jawline, blue eyes. Hey, nice to meet you, he said. And, hey, your mom has been so nice to me. And, hey, your mom is so cool. My mother beamed from the corner. I don't know what made us decide to take him out for pizza. Maybe because his looks were so intimidating, we had to bring him down to our level. Jason started eating his pizza from the tip in little bites. What's wrong with you? I said. Fold it in half and eat it like a normal person. Why would I fold my pizza in half? Jason said. He was from Arizona or California, places where pizza is an afterthought. You would get laughed out of New Jersey for this, Liz said. He thought this was hilarious and folded his pizza, grease running down his chin. We were 2 young women, regular girls, who ordered not 1, but 2 slices of pizza each. We were not the kind of girls Calvin Klein models were used to being around. Laughed out of New Jersey, he said. When can I go to New Jersey? Never, I wanted to say. You're too beautiful for New Jersey. But then I remembered that I had to drive Liz home. You can go right now if you want. My heart began to race because it occurred to me that Jason would be a perfect ploy to make my boyfriend jealous. We could show up at his door, introduce Jason as my new friend. I'll give you the tour, I said with a laugh. We can drive past my boyfriend's house. Your boyfriend's house, he said. Yeah, sure, why not? As we drove, we pointed out landmarks. There's Giant Stadium. There's the TikTok Diner. There's Pizza 46. Jason sat in the back and crammed his face between the front seats. I was nervous to drop Liz off. Once she got out of the car, it would be Jason and me. There's a safety in having your best friend at your side, the kind of person who might talk sense into you, the kind of person who might say, go back to the city. Don't drive by your boyfriend's house. But she got out unceremoniously, and Jason hopped in the front seat. If I turned around and drove him home, the night would be over. You don't go out with lonely male models more than once because they're never lonely for long. After that night, I never saw him again until he appeared on a popular television show a few years later. So I drove to my boyfriend's ordinary neighborhood, much like the neighborhood I grew up in. Months later, after he broke up with me for another girl, my mother said, You were destined to outgrow him anyway. He wouldn't have been able to keep up with you. You would have eclipsed him. Yet there I was, driving down his street, crazed, with this model in my car. Just another Jersey girl like all the unremarkable Jersey girls before me, dragging along some guy to make my boyfriend jealous. I was treating Jason, who was nothing but nice, like a hunting trophy. Hot with shame, I changed my mind and sped up, searching for a cross street to escape. Aren't we driving past his house? Jason said. Aren't we meeting him? We should get back, I said. I can't breathe out here. Can't you smell the Passaic River from here? But Jason had to go to the bathroom. I could have taken him to a bathroom at a diner on the highway on the way back to the city. The TikTok was 5 minutes from there. Instead, I said, my dad lives about 10 minutes away. We could go to his house. Great, Jason said. I love dads. A few months earlier, when I asked my boyfriend if he wanted to meet my father, he said, why? It's not like we're getting married or anything. At that point, I had already started the process of transferring from Northeastern to NYU to be closer to him. I fantasized about marrying him. My father was watching TV in his den when we arrived. Jason shook my father's hand and then excused himself to use the bathroom. Is that the boyfriend? My father said. He looked impressed. No, Dad, I said. That is not the boyfriend. A few days later, while I was still in New York, I saw the boyfriend and told him about Jason, that we had a wild adventure, that I drove him out to New Jersey to meet my father, how good looking he was, and wasn't it interesting that he was a Calvin Klein model? His face twitched a little, but not enough to express jealousy, or any emotions for that matter. When should I have known that it was so unimportant for him? Was it when I told him I loved him and he didn't say it back? Or when he told me he didn't need to meet my dad? Or when he didn't tell me that he had made out with other girls? The cool girl act works when you're eating pizza with a male model. Jason saw me as an elusive and confident person. It made him want to hang out with me for the night and to venture out to the Jersey suburbs. The cool girl act doesn't work when you're trying to make your boyfriend fall in love with you. Maybe he was never even my boyfriend to begin with. So, are you in love with this guy now? The boyfriend said, smirking. No, I said. Not at all. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 14th issue of the New York Times Style section. Your reader has been Laura. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock is episode number 2 of To Rescue the American Spirit by Bret Baier. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, broadcasting daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Readings broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading Studios are at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Radio Reading's website is nfradioreading.org. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 716-821-5555.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service